Welcome back for part two. My guest today is Penelope Holt, and she has this amazing book called The Angel Scroll, which we're finding out more about as we go through this interview. So before, in part one, we were talking about atheists and how they're changing their mind and how people are hungry for the truth. I've often said when atheists come to me and say, prove that there's God, there is no such thing. Once you die, that's it. And I go, well, why are you in such a big hurry to convince me there's no God? If you don't believe there's God, what do I care? What do I think? It doesn't matter. And then the
Yeah.
second thing I say to people who say, Douglas, those people were nasty when I'm on the radio or whatever. And I say, yes, but I'll tell you something. When they die, boy, are they going to be surprised because they're going to find out there really is life. So, as you were saying, there are some famous people who said, well, we've been a little too hasty. Maybe we should have been intellectually talking about the spiritual world, which again, nobody can completely understand. We see a little bit in part. I've been doing this since 1974, and I would say I know this much, and there's that much more to go. Matter of fact, the more people who investigate the spiritual world, you might agree, the more they say, oh my God, there is so much. And the thing is, it's mysterious because we don't understand it. So getting back to your point, when young people are looking for the truth, they're depressed. They see us going through these apocalyptic times, the end times, difficult times, times of extreme is the way I would describe it. Also a renovation time, because when we come out this tunnel of renovation, we're going to have a better world, but it's going to take maybe a whole generation to get there, maybe 10 years, I don't know. But let's get back to when you talk to these people, or how do you think about this when people approach you, as you alluded to in part one, that people are thirsty and they're now backpedaling, I guess is the term, to say, well, maybe we were hasty. What do you say to them, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think that we're in a different era. And, the book is trying to imply that the message should be coming through differently. I remember you just said something about there's more to see. I remember distinctly being a child and looking out the window and knowing that I wasn't seeing what was really there.
Wow.
And this is why I love Bernardo Castro, because he said, the thing that you see is not the thing itself. And Donald Hoffman, who is doing great work in trying to prove that consciousness is the foundation of being, that the consciousness doesn't come from the body is created by consciousness. And that even time and space are constructs, that there's a deeper, like that the Planck scale 10 to the minus 35, space disappears, and you just start getting into quantum fields where there are patterns of excitation. So I think, the religion of the 20th century that was based on materialism, there's a God outside there, right? You can't see him and therefore you can't believe in him. I think a lot of the new science, Douglas, is really trying to align with what people like you understand, which is look, I used to think as a kid, why can't I see microscopically? Why can't I see telescopically? Why do we only see in the blue light range? Why can't we see, red light? Why can't we see the millions of neutrinos that are passing through us? We simply can't, because our consciousness is filtered through our senses. And I don't like to get too carried away with labels or psychic or this or that, but I do know that we are seeing only a tiny, tiny fraction of what is out there. And so for people to be arrogant enough to say, those things don't exist, angels don't exist, it's very arrogant. Yeah, it's very arrogant. So I know that I can't see it, but just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's there. And the internet is wonderful now. I've been watching all of these near-death experiences. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of people who've had near-death experiences where it sounds to me that they are released for a short while from the lens of physical perception, and then their consciousness begins to see all of these other things. And so I think there's really kids have been taught that if you believe in God, you're stupid and you're dumb and you're anti-science. And, the smart kids don't believe in it. But I think there's a way that science and spirituality are being united, whereby it becomes the intelligent thing to do. Believing in God becomes the intelligent thing to do.
I agree. We
Yeah.
call that practical spirituality
Yeah.
or practical Christianity, since I come from a Christian world, although I've traveled the world and I've also investigated, as probably yourself and others have, because once you get a taste of spirituality, you say, what about theosophy? What about Buddhism? What about, and you go on and say, we all spiritual or Christian and other religious points. If you go back to Father Abraham, one source, if you will, well, what about before him? Well, we go back to Adam or Noah, then we go back to Adam. So if we look at that, we can intellectualize saying, we have a map in front of us, but there's no possible way we know all the roads and ups and downs. And so people get to this idea of, as you've alluded to, you can't see. You can only see visible light, which is a small part of the spectrum. What happens when you close your eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Where does the world go?
Yeah.
It's still there. You just can't see it. But when you close your eyes and you do meditation, you see more. And so, again, we get that little nudge, as you're alluding to, and people begin to see. And so the idea is that some people, doesn't matter what you say, they're going to deny it, deny it, deny it. I know people will tell me that grass is not green. And even if I show it to them, they're still going to say, no, it's not green. So those people, you have to let them say, okay, you'll get it sooner or later. And that stops us from getting angry at people who disagree with us. Your book, your story, I think is very, very important, because as I'm listening to what you're saying, uh, there's a lot beyond the words. This is provoking people to expand their consciousness. My whole life has been attempting to understand consciousness. And I'm talking about human consciousness. There are other consciousness in animals and plants and whatnot. But the point being is that I have not found anybody, including myself, that can say, this is what consciousness is.
Mm-hmm.
It's indescribable.
Mm-hmm.
And when people give you a certain amount, say, this is what it is, and you say, but what about that? And then it goes away. But the deep thinkers like Einstein and other people said they wish they had spent more time in the metaphysical, spiritual aspects, because they would know more. And as you've done this, your path, you must have been contemplating a lot of time in trying to grab a hold of what that spiritual consciousness is, and then delineate it and put it into words, which is, trying to shove a watermelon into a small neck glass or bottle. So how did you do that? And I think you're being divinely guided. I think people should run right away and pick up your book, The Angel Scroll, and again to your website, penelopeholt.com. And right now, if you're thirsty and you're looking, this lady's onto something, and I would suggest that you go do it right away, because I'm fascinated in what you have to say about this. I'm also fascinated that you were only 2 years old when you were talking about paragraphs and writing and things like that.
My mum just
I
said I
think,
was a chatterbox. I could talk hens and chickens to death. I was 2 years old, speaking in complete sentences, and and my mother was a very quiet lady, and she used to say, you would just wore me out with the constant chatter. Um, but I
well,
just came in very verbal.
I think that comes from your soul mind coming through. Because when you're younger, you're closer to the gateway, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of remember what's in the pre-existence, and
Yeah.
then here we still bring this through. And I could see you chattering away like that, sort of in your own world, and your mom just going like, "Oh my God, who says such words? Where did you get that?" But being a very loving mommy didn't say anything to scold you or keep you
No,
quiet.
my
It's,
mother was a gentle soul. She was very loving. I was very fortunate to have her because she was a very, very loving mother.
yeah, well, she set you up, she set the stage for your life, and here you are
Yeah.
talking to me today, far away from home in Canada, so to speak, where I am, and talking to you about this amazing experience you've had. Tell me, has this changed your perception in, I'm going to call faith? Faith for me faith uh, is sort of a matter of uh, belief is built upon this evidence. And when you have evidence, you have faith, that kind of thing. That's not
Yes.
quite my model.
Promise of things hoped for, evidence of things unseen. That's the
Exactly.
definition of
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah. Faith is
Um,
built upon belief. Belief is built upon evidence. That's kind of my motto. But
mm.
so how did this, does this profoundly change you as you went through? How long did it take you to do this, by the way?
um, on and off, I wrote it, I rewrote it. So it was a few years. And what I did in the book too is I brought in other faith traditions. So Claire is confused, she's a seeker. So I want the reader to identify. She's having visions, her husband died, she doesn't know up from down. And so a Buddhist monk comes into her life and explains her experiences through his
Understood. Right.
tradition. A Benedictine monk is the one who's translating the scroll, and he believes in prophecy. He's a Christian. He really believes that this is the gospel that will spread the good news of Jesus in another way. She goes to Glastonbury Tor and meets an anthropologist a woman who talks about Celtic druids and the goddess worship, which was part of druid pagan.
Mhm.
And, Philip, there's a story that Philip sent Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea is famous because he gave the crucified Jesus his tomb. And there's, of course, the Holy Grail connected to that legend is the claim that Saint Philip sent Joseph of Arimathea to England to evangelize the Celts. And of course, the Druids were the Celtic priests. And Joseph of Arimathea allegedly took the Grail, the chalice from the Last Supper. He collected the drops of blood from Jesus and he took them to England and they were buried under Glastonbury Tor. And of course, that's what kicked off the great Grail quests of Arthurian legend, King Arthur and Camelot.
My
But what is
gosh.
interesting is that the Druids worshipped different deities. They were more polytheistic, and in their canon or belief system, there was a god called Isus. So when Joseph of Arimathea comes start talking about Jesus, they said, there's a connection here. So I think it's really interesting to connect. People sort of start with their own faith tradition, Christianity, and then they don't really go back to the roots of how, like you were saying, going back to Abraham and before that to Adam, going back to how at these time periods, all of these faith traditions were evolving and intersecting. And I think it's important for people to be open and not dogmatic and to really be curious and to seek more, be curious, because
Well,
what we know is minuscule. So what is wrong with learning more or studying more or being open to more things?
well, you should be. My particular church and our organization, we teach practical spirituality, which is, if you look at the mystical aspects of the Christ, we called him Yeshua, by the way, and that seems to be the popular name creeping into our consciousness rather than Jesus the Christ. It's Yeshua, the Savior. And that particular name has a huge vibration or power as the only one that came to get us out of where we were going and save the world from its sin or being off the target. So as we develop spiritually, these visitations you're talking about that Claire had, where Jesus showed up in her vision, angels showed up. These divine beings naturally show up in our world because they've always been there. We're just now opening our eyes and seeing them, so to speak. And so as we practice our spirituality practically daily, it's natural that you should have prophetic dreams, that you should have inspiration to help you make decisions, or that you will find out what love really is, and that you will find out, yeah, you have to have some bad times. Death is going to come to us all, but that's not a bad thing. But at the time it is, but it helps us go to the next place, which isn't so bad. And so all of a sudden, you're not afraid to die. You understand what difficulties are happening. And then you say, okay, I'm having a problem. What can I do about it? Not, oh my God, the devil's got me kind of thing. And I'm, the devil made me do it, or the devil is so predominant in the world. I say, no, it's like darkness. Turn on the light switch, where does darkness go away? And so when you turn on and wake up, you become aware. But the analogy that you're using here, that we only see a little bit, and your book reviewing how this lady Claire, which I think somewhat is a lot like your life, a little bit going on with different things, that it's an amazing journey. So how can people get a hold of your book again? Where can they get it from?
You can go to penelopeholt.com and read all about how it was written and the backstory, and then link to Amazon from there. Buy the book or go straight to Amazon. It's sold Barnes & Noble, Amazon. But if they go to my website, they can learn more. It's interesting too, Douglas. The actual angel scroll was set, the one that before it was claimed to be a hoax, was supposedly written by Yeshua, the priest.
There's that name again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so in the book, in the angel scroll, he is referred to as Yeshua. Of course, Jesus was a rabbi, he was a teacher, Yeshua the priest. So it's not curious, but it is curious that you would mention that, because that's the name in the book is Yeshua, more so than Jesus.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back for part 3.